Someone else may already be moving toward the opportunity you are still thinking about. You are waiting for the right moment, the right words, the right approval. You tell yourself you need more time to be certain. But while you wait, someone else acts. They make the call. They take the position. They enter the room first. And when you finally decide to move, the opportunity may already be gone. Hesitation has a price. The transcript's first rule is not about acting recklessly. It is about shortening the distance between deciding and doing. Most people wait for certainty that never comes. They think through every possible problem. They ask for opinions. They imagine what could go wrong. Then another day passes. And another. Eventually, preparation becomes an excuse for avoiding the risk of action. Look at the opportunities you still remember. The conversation you should have started. The opportunity you should have taken. The door you should have walked through before it closed. In many of those moments, you were not defeated by someone more capable. You were simply slower to act. The people who move first do not necessarily know more than you. They have simply learned not to remain trapped in indecision long enough for it to become expensive. That does not mean rushing into every opportunity. Moving first is not the same as moving blindly. You still need enough information to make a sensible decision. You still need to understand the risks. But there is a difference between caution and hesitation. Caution helps you prepare. Hesitation keeps you standing still. The longer you leave the gap between deciding and doing, the more time doubt has to grow. A simple decision becomes complicated. A possible opportunity becomes a source of fear. And while you are still asking whether you should move, someone else may already have moved. That is why action often needs to be quiet. You do not need to announce your plans before they exist. You do not need everyone around you to approve your next step. You do not need to explain yourself to people who are not responsible for the outcome. Sometimes, explanation only creates resistance. Someone can talk you out of an idea. Someone can make you doubt yourself. Someone can see what you are preparing and act before you do. So there is power in moving calmly without announcing every step. Let the results speak before the explanation. There is also a deeper reason people hesitate. Sometimes one bad experience teaches you to fear the next one. You acted once and failed. You took a risk and regretted it. So the next time an opportunity appears, your mind tells you to wait. Waiting feels safer. Eventually, you begin calling that fear being careful. But if the same hesitation keeps costing you opportunities, it is no longer protecting you. It is controlling you. The transcript asks you to notice where you hesitate most and whether someone else watching the same opportunity is willing to move before you. That question matters because opportunities rarely arrive with a guarantee. At some point, you must decide whether you have enough information and then accept the uncertainty that remains. You do not need perfect confidence. You need enough clarity to take the next step. So the next time you feel yourself saying, "I'll wait a little longer," stop. Ask what you are actually waiting for. More information or permission? More preparation or courage? If the answer is simply fear, recognize it. Then move. Not recklessly, not loudly, just decisively. Because the person who consistently waits for the perfect moment may spend their entire life watching other people take imperfect opportunities. And once you learn to move before hesitation becomes paralysis, you gain another advantage. You become harder to predict. People have less time to prepare for your move. And sometimes, the best position is not being the person everyone watches. It is being the person they never thought they needed to watch. That leads to the next rule. Let them underestimate you. There is a strange advantage in being underestimated. When people think you are less capable than you really are, they stop watching closely. They lower their guard. They reveal more. And most importantly, they give you room to move. The transcript's second rule is simple. Do not rush to prove how capable you are. We are taught to display our strengths. Show people what you can do. Make sure they know how intelligent, ambitious, or capable you are. But proving yourself too early can create an unexpected problem. You put people on alert. Once they know exactly what you are capable of, they can prepare for you. They can compete with you. They can block your progress. They can watch your next move. Sometimes being underestimated gives you something far more valuable than praise. Freedom. Think about the quiet person in a group. They do not speak the most. They do not compete for attention. They do not constantly announce their achievements. Others may assume they are ordinary. Meanwhile, that person is learning, preparing, building relationships, and improving. By the time everyone notices, the gap has already become difficult to close. That is the advantage of being underestimated. You are allowed to develop without constant interference. You have time to make mistakes privately. You can change your strategy without explaining every adjustment. You can build without an audience, measuring every step. The transcript describes this as the gap between what people think you are and what you are actually becoming. That gap can become your advantage. But there is an important distinction. You are not pretending to be weak because you are afraid. You are simply refusing to correct every false assumption people make about you. Someone thinks you are inexperienced? Let your results change their opinion. Someone thinks your idea is too small? Build it. Someone does not believe you are capable? You do not need to argue. You can let reality answer. This is especially useful when you are working on something that is not finished. People often reveal their plans too early. They talk about the business they are going to build. They announce the project before it works. They tell everyone what they are planning to achieve. Then, other people have an opportunity to interfere before the idea becomes strong enough to defend itself. Sometimes the smartest move is to say less. Work quietly. Improve quietly. Let people assume whatever they want. You are not required to correct every misunderstanding, because attention is a resource. The more attention you attract before you are ready, the more resistance you may create. A quiet period of preparation can be more valuable than public recognition. And when the result finally appears, the people who underestimated you have a problem. They were looking at the version of you they believed existed. They were not watching the person you were becoming. That is why the transcript describes being underestimated as buying you time. Time to plan, grow, and build without unnecessary resistance. But do not turn this into an obsession with surprising people. Your goal is not to shock everyone. Your goal is to create enough space to develop. There is no need to hide every achievement. There is no need to deliberately make yourself look incompetent. And there is no need to manipulate people into believing something false. Simply stop feeling compelled to prove yourself every time someone doubts you. Sometimes, being underestimated is not an insult. It is an advantage you did not have to pay for. So, the next time someone dismisses your ability, resist the urge to immediately correct them. Ask yourself, would their misunderstanding actually hurt me? If the answer is no, let it remain. Use the freedom. Keep building. And when the time comes, let the result reveal what they failed to see. Because the people who constantly announce their strength make themselves easy to measure. The people who quietly develop their strength become much harder to predict. And once you stop trying to prove yourself, you gain another advantage. You can start watching other people instead, not just listening to their words. Watching what they hesitate to say. Watching what they avoid. Watching when their tone changes. Watching what they emphasize. Because people reveal far more when you stop rushing to speak. Before you react, study. That is the next rule. Most people enter a conversation preparing their answer. That is why they miss what is actually being said. They hear the words, but they ignore the pause before the answer, the sudden change of subject, the detail someone emphasizes too strongly, the joke that appears exactly when the conversation gets uncomfortable. People reveal information long before they realize they are revealing it. The problem is that most people are too busy preparing their next sentence to notice. They interrupt. They defend themselves. They explain. They rush to fill silence. And by doing so, they lose the opportunity to understand the person in front of them. Machiavelli's advantage begins with observation. Before you decide what someone means, watch how they behave. Before you answer an important question, ask yourself what the other person actually wants from the conversation. Because people rarely state their motives directly. Someone may offer you a compliment and then ask for a favor. Someone may agree with you repeatedly because they genuinely support you, or because they are waiting for the moment when disagreement benefits them. Someone may give a short answer because they have nothing more to say, or because they are deliberately hiding something. You cannot know which one it is by listening only to the words. You have to observe the pattern. That does not mean treating everyone as a suspect. It means refusing to walk into important conversations blind. The transcript emphasizes small signals, hesitation, omitted details, changes in topic, and unusual emphasis. These signals do not automatically prove deception, but they tell you where to pay attention. That distinction matters. Observation is not paranoia. It is information gathering. And the best way to gather information is often to speak less. Ask a question, then stop. Let the other person answer. Do not immediately rescue them from silence. Do not rush to add your own explanation. Do not reveal what you already suspect. Give them space, because silence creates room for information. When people feel that a conversation is finished, they may give you the prepared answer. When silence remains, they may continue talking. They clarify. They add details. They correct themselves. Sometimes they reveal more than they intended. The transcript describes this as letting silence work, rather than filling every uncomfortable pause yourself. You are not forcing anyone to confess. You are simply refusing to interrupt the information they are already giving you. This also changes your position emotionally. When you understand what someone wants before responding, you stop reacting to the surface. You become less defensive. You stop arguing with statements that were never the real issue. You can ask better questions. And sometimes one good question is more powerful than 10 explanations. Instead of saying, "That's not what I meant," ask, "What makes you see it that way?" Instead of immediately accepting an offer, ask, "What exactly are you expecting from me?" Instead of reacting to a sudden disagreement, ask, "What changed?" The purpose is not to interrogate people. It is to slow the interaction down enough for the real situation to become visible. This skill becomes even more valuable when the stakes are high. In negotiations, at work, during conflict, when someone suddenly changes their behavior, when an opportunity seems too good, when a person who normally agrees with you suddenly becomes distant, do not immediately create a story in your head. Observe first. Facts before assumptions. That single habit can prevent enormous mistakes. But observation has another advantage. It tells you not only what people say, but what they consistently do. Someone can promise loyalty. Watch their behavior. Someone can claim to respect your time. Watch whether they repeatedly waste it. Someone can say they support your goals. Watch what happens when your success creates competition. Words can be prepared. Patterns are harder to fake forever. So study the pattern. Listen carefully. Notice what changes. Notice what stays consistent. And most importantly, do not reveal everything you have noticed. You do not need to announce your analysis. You do not need to tell someone, "I noticed you changed your tone when I mentioned that." Keep observing. The information becomes more valuable when the other person does not know exactly what you have understood. This is where patience becomes a form of power. You are not trying to dominate the conversation. You are trying to understand the game before choosing your move. And once you understand what someone wants, another possibility opens up. You no longer have to force your ideas onto them. You can introduce an idea, step back, and allow them to think. Because people defend conclusions, they believe they reach themselves far more strongly than conclusions they feel were imposed on them. That leads to the next rule. Plant the idea. Let them believe they discovered it. The easiest way to make someone resist an idea is to tell them they have to accept it. People dislike feeling controlled. Tell someone what they should think, and their instinct may be to defend their independence. But give them a question, a possibility, or a different way of looking at the situation, and they may arrive at the conclusion themselves. That is the principle behind this rule. Plant the idea, do not force it. The transcript explains that people often defend their own conclusions more strongly than ideas imposed on them. Imagine you want a colleague to consider a better approach to a problem. You could say, "Your method is wrong, do this instead." Even if your solution is better, you have immediately created resistance. Or you could ask, "What do you think would happen if we tried this approach?" Then stop. Let them think. Maybe they reject it. Maybe they ask a question. Maybe they return to the idea later. That is fine. The objective is not to win the conversation. The objective is to influence the outcome. This distinction is important because many people care more about receiving credit than getting the right result. They want everyone to know the idea was theirs. They want recognition. They want to be seen as the smartest person in the room. But if recognition becomes more important than the outcome, you may sabotage your own influence. Sometimes someone else accepting an idea is more valuable than everyone knowing you created it. If they believe the idea belongs to them, they may defend it with greater commitment. They push it forward. They explain it to others. They invest their own energy into making it work. You did not have to force them. You simply created the conditions for the idea to take root. The transcript describes this as dropping an idea lightly into a conversation, allowing it to breathe, and resisting the urge to immediately claim credit. Requires patience. You have to tolerate the possibility that someone else may receive the recognition, and that is difficult for the ego. But influence is not always about ownership. Sometimes it is about direction. A good question can change a decision without looking like a command. A carefully chosen observation can make someone reconsider a belief. A small suggestion can eventually become a major action. And because the person participates in reaching the conclusion, they are more likely to act on it. This principle also protects you from unnecessary resistance. If you constantly tell people what to do, they learn to defend themselves against you. If you ask thoughtful questions, they have to think. And once someone starts thinking, you are no longer fighting their resistance directly. You are giving them room to discover something. But this should not become an excuse for manipulation. The goal is not to secretly control people's minds. The practical lesson is simpler. Do not confuse persuasion with pressure. Pressure can produce immediate compliance. Influence creates voluntary movement. That difference matters in leadership, relationships, negotiation, and everyday communication. A leader who constantly commands may get obedience while they are present. A leader who helps people understand why something matters can create commitment even when they are absent. That is stronger, and it begins with letting go of the need to win every conversation. You do not need the last word. You do not need immediate agreement. You do not need to correct every misunderstanding. Sometimes you say one thing, then allow time to do the rest. The idea grows. The person thinks about it. The situation changes. And eventually, the decision appears. The most satisfying part may be that nobody remembers exactly when the idea began, but the outcome happened. And that is what matters. This same principle becomes even more important when someone makes a mistake. Because if your goal is influence rather than ego, embarrassing someone publicly is usually a terrible strategy. You may prove that you are right, but you can also create resentment that lasts far longer than the mistake. There is a smarter way to correct people. Never humiliate publicly when you can correct privately. Being right is not always the same as being effective. Someone makes a mistake in front of everyone. You immediately see it. You could point it out and prove that you are right. For a few seconds, you might even feel powerful. But the other person will remember something very different. You embarrassed them. The transcript's fifth rule is simple. When correction is necessary, choose the right setting. Public humiliation creates resentment. Private correction gives people a chance to hear the truth without an audience watching their reaction. Think about a workplace meeting. Someone gives the wrong number. You interrupt. You're wrong. That's not the actual figure. The room goes quiet. You have corrected the mistake, but you may have also created a personal conflict. The person is now thinking less about the number and more about the humiliation. They may become defensive. They may remember the incident for months. And the next time you challenge them, they may resist, not because your point is wrong, but because they do not want to experience that feeling again. There is a better approach. Let the moment pass. Then speak privately. Explain the problem without an audience. Correct the mistake without attacking the person's identity. The message can remain firm while the unnecessary humiliation disappears. Protecting someone's dignity does not require you to ignore their mistake. This distinction matters. The transcript does not say to forget what happened. It says to remember privately and use what you have learned to adjust your level of trust and reliance. One mistake tells you very little. A pattern tells you much more. Someone makes one error. You correct it. They improve. There is no reason to treat the mistake as a permanent judgment of their character. But if the same errors continue despite correction, that becomes information. You do not need to announce, "I knew this person was unreliable." You simply adjust. Give them less responsibility. Verify their work. Change your expectations. Reduce your dependence on them if necessary. No drama is required. This is a much stronger form of awareness because you are responding to patterns rather than emotions. And it protects your own reputation. People notice how you treat those who make mistakes. Someone who constantly humiliates others may appear powerful for a moment, but eventually people become afraid of making mistakes around them. They stop speaking honestly. They hide problems. They avoid responsibility. The leader thinks everyone is performing well. In reality, everyone is simply afraid to tell the truth. That is a terrible environment for making good decisions. A calm correction creates something different. People know you expect standards, but they also know they will not be publicly destroyed for making an honest mistake. That combination creates respect without unnecessary fear. And there is another reason to avoid public correction. You do not want to turn every mistake into a competition over status. If someone challenges you publicly, you do not have to prove dominance every time. Sometimes the strongest move is to remain composed. You can correct the issue later. You can remember what happened. You can change how much you trust the person. You can make your decision without announcing your entire reasoning. Not every reaction needs an audience. This connects to a broader principle in the transcript. The sharpest people do not fight over every small exchange. They preserve their energy for what actually matters. Imagine someone makes a minor mistake that has no meaningful consequence. Do you really need to win that moment? Probably not. If you correct every tiny error, you create friction everywhere. People become defensive before you even speak. But if you choose your corrections carefully, your words carry more weight. When you finally say something matters, people know it matters. That is strategic restraint. You are not becoming passive. You are choosing where your force goes. And this leads naturally to the next principle, because power does not come from winning every exchange. Sometimes you deliberately allow someone else to win a small point. You give them something they want. You let them feel that they have gained ground. Meanwhile, you protect the objective that actually matters. You do not need to win every battle to win the war. Most people waste their strength trying to win everything. Every disagreement, every negotiation, every small decision, every argument. They believe giving ground means losing. But that mindset can make you weaker. The transcript's sixth rule is to give small wins when they help you protect the larger objective. Imagine a negotiation where the other person wants something relatively minor. You could fight over it. You could spend 20 minutes proving why your position is correct. Or you could give them the small concession and protect the one thing that actually matters. They leave feeling like they won. You leave with the outcome you wanted. Who really lost? Nobody. And that is the point. Not every victory deserves to be fought for. A small concession can buy you something much more valuable. Space. Good negotiators understand this. They do not need to win every detail. They identify the objective that matters most, then allow flexibility everywhere else. That does not mean being weak. It means knowing the difference between what is valuable and what is merely visible. Ego often confuses the two. Someone challenges a small detail, and suddenly you feel the need to defend it. Someone disagrees with you, and you want to prove them wrong. Someone wants a minor concession, and you refuse because you do not want them to think they have power over you. But ask yourself, does this actually affect the outcome? If not, why spend your leverage here? The transcript compares this to giving up a small piece of ground to protect the larger territory. That is a useful way to think about conflict. You are not trying to control every inch. You are protecting the position that matters. This principle becomes especially important because constant resistance creates predictable behavior. If you fight every request, people prepare for conflict before they even approach you. If every conversation becomes a battle, people stop cooperating. You may technically win arguments while losing relationships, opportunities, and trust. That is an expensive form of victory. Strategic people understand that cooperation can sometimes produce more leverage than confrontation. Give someone a small win. Let them feel heard. Allow them to keep a minor preference. Then use the goodwill and space created to move the important decision forward. The other person does not need to feel defeated. In fact, the strongest outcomes are often the ones where nobody feels defeated, because defeated people look for revenge. People who believe they participated in the solution are more likely to support it. This is why you should stop measuring every interaction by who got the last word. The person who speaks last does not necessarily win. The person who gets the result they actually wanted does. Outcome over ego. That should be your filter. Before entering a disagreement, identify what you genuinely need, not everything you prefer, not everything that would make you feel superior. The thing that actually matters. Then protect it. Everything else can become flexible. This also applies outside negotiation. At work, you may not need to correct every minor decision. In relationships, you may not need to win every argument. In business, you may not need to beat every competitor on every feature. In everyday life, you may discover that many conflicts disappear once you stop treating them as contests. Your energy is limited. Your attention is limited. Your influence is limited. Spend those resources where they produce the greatest return. And sometimes the best move is to allow someone else to believe they won. That does not make you a loser. It means you understand the difference between winning the moment and winning the situation. There is another layer to this. Before you decide what matters, you need to understand the environment in which the decision is being made. A good move in the wrong room can become a bad move. A correct statement at the wrong moment can fail. An excellent idea delivered when everyone is distracted may never receive a chance. That is why strategic people do not simply prepare their message. They prepare by reading the room, and that becomes the next rule. Not every situation should be won. Some situations should be left. The problem is that most people leave too late. They stay in jobs after the opportunity has disappeared. They stay in relationships after the balance has collapsed. They stay in routines that no longer serve them. They remain attached to an old version of themselves simply because leaving feels like admitting defeat. But sometimes, staying is the real loss. The transcript's 8th and 10th rules point toward the same principle. Leave while your presence still has value, rather than waiting until everyone is tired of it, including you. Think about a project that once energized you. At its beginning, everyone was excited. Then, the momentum slows. The same problems repeat. Your contribution becomes smaller. But instead of recognizing the change, you keep going because you have already invested so much. This is where people confuse persistence with attachment. Persistence means continuing because the goal still matters. Attachment means continuing because you are afraid to let go. Those are not the same. Sometimes the strongest decision is to recognize that a chapter has reached its natural ending, and timing matters. Leaving too early can waste potential. Leaving too late can destroy what made the experience valuable in the first place. The transcript uses the idea of leaving at the peak, when something is still strong, respected, and meaningful, rather than waiting until it declines into exhaustion and resentment. This applies to more than projects. It applies to identity. Maybe you have spent years trying to become a certain type of person, but your circumstances changed. Your priorities changed. Your ambitions changed. Yet you continue performing the old version because people are familiar with it. At some point, you have to leave that version behind. Not because it was worthless, because it has finished its job. There is courage in ending something while you still love it. Anyone can walk away after everything has collapsed. The harder decision is leaving while you still have reasons to stay. That is why timing matters so much. The best exit is rarely dramatic. You do not need a public announcement. You do not need to explain every detail. You simply recognize that the moment has changed and act accordingly. A calm exit often communicates more than a long explanation. It says, "I am choosing where my energy goes next." This is not about disappearing whenever something becomes difficult. Difficulty is not the same as decline. If something is difficult but still growing, stay. If something challenges you but remains meaningful, work through it. If a relationship has a temporary problem but both people are improving, do not abandon it simply because the moment is uncomfortable. The question is whether the situation is still creating value. If the answer is yes, persistence may be necessary. If the answer is no, staying may simply be consuming resources that could be invested elsewhere. This is why you need to distinguish pain from deterioration. Pain can be part of growth. Deterioration is a signal to reconsider. And there is another reason strategic exits matter. People remember endings. A strong beginning can be forgotten. A long middle can become ordinary. But the way something ends often determines the memory that survives. Leave with dignity. Do not burn everything behind you. Do not create unnecessary enemies. Do not stay until resentment becomes the defining feature of the experience. Protect the value of what came before. Then move forward. The transcript describes the unexpected exit as powerful because it preserves mystery and prevents your presence from becoming predictable. But the deeper lesson is not about making people wonder where you went. It is about knowing when your energy is more valuable somewhere else. You cannot build a new chapter while constantly maintaining an old one. Sometimes the next opportunity requires space. And space only appears when you are willing to let something end. So ask yourself, where am I staying because it still matters, and where am I staying simply because I am afraid to leave? That question can expose a lot. Maybe it is a project. Maybe it is a habit. Maybe it is an outdated goal. Maybe it is a role you have already outgrown. You do not need to destroy it. You simply need to know when its time is over. Because power is not only knowing when to enter, it is knowing when to leave. And the final lesson takes that idea even further. Some things should not merely be left before they decline. They should be released while they are still at their strongest, so that your next chapter begins before the previous one becomes a burden. The people who consistently stay ahead are not necessarily the smartest people in the room. They are often the ones who notice what everyone else misses. They notice the pause before an answer, the sudden change in tone, the person who becomes unusually quiet, the tension between two people who are pretending everything is fine, the opportunity nobody is watching, the moment when something has reached its peak, and they understand one critical principle. Do not react to the room before you have read the room. The transcript's 7th rule describes every situation as having an atmosphere before anyone speaks. There are existing alliances, tensions, moods, and expectations. Walking in without noticing them is like making a move without knowing the position of the board. Most people enter a situation carrying their own plan. They already know what they want to say. They already know what they want to do. So they immediately begin executing. But the situation may have changed before they arrived. The person they expected to support them may have changed their position. The timing may be wrong. The room may already be tense. An idea that would work tomorrow may fail today simply because nobody is ready to hear it. The strategic person pauses. They watch first. Who is speaking? Who is silent? Who seems uncomfortable? Who is unusually close to whom? What changed before you arrived? You do not need hours of analysis. Sometimes 30 seconds of observation can prevent an hour of damage. Information comes before movement, and this principle connects every lesson in the video. Move first, but do not move blindly. Let people underestimate you, but do not become unaware of what they are doing. Study before you speak. Plant ideas instead of forcing them. Correct privately instead of creating unnecessary enemies. Give small victories when they protect the larger objective. Leave before your value declines. These are not isolated tricks. They are different expressions of the same skill. Awareness. You are learning to see the game before reacting to it. And that changes the way you handle people. The next compliment you receive may simply be a compliment, or it may be followed by a request. You do not need to become suspicious. Just notice what comes next. The next disagreement may be genuine, or it may reveal a change in someone's priorities. Again, do not invent a story. Observe the pattern. The next silence may mean nothing, or it may create the space for someone to reveal what they were avoiding. Do not rush to fill it. This is the difference between awareness and paranoia. Paranoia assumes everyone is against you. Awareness simply refuses to assume anything before looking. That distinction keeps you calm. You are not searching for enemies. You are gathering information. And once you have enough information, you can choose your response instead of being pulled into someone else's timing. That may mean speaking. It may mean waiting. It may mean giving a small concession. It may mean making a move nobody expected. Or it may mean leaving. Because one of the most important lessons in the transcript is that timing determines how your actions are remembered. Staying too long can turn a strong impression into exhaustion. Leaving at the right moment can preserve the value of everything that came before. The same principle applies to your own life. You do not have to remain loyal to every version of yourself. A role that once helped you may eventually become a limitation. A routine that once protected you may eventually hold you back. A project that once gave you purpose may eventually consume energy without producing meaningful progress. Recognize the difference. Then act. The goal is not to disappear mysteriously or manipulate people into wondering about you. The goal is to maintain control over where your attention goes. Your presence should be a choice, not a dependency. And when you understand that, you stop trying to win every moment. You stop explaining yourself to everyone. You stop reacting to every provocation. You stop announcing every plan. You stop fighting over details that do not matter. You start watching. then deciding, then moving. That is the complete game. Not cruelty, not deception, not controlling everyone around you. Clarity. Machiavelli, as this transcript frames him, was interested in the difference between people who react to circumstances and people who understand the forces shaping those circumstances. You do not need to become cold to use these principles. You simply need to stop being the last person to notice what is happening. Speak less when speaking adds nothing. Listen longer when information matters. Move quickly when hesitation becomes expensive. Stay quiet when your plans are not ready. Let others underestimate you when correcting them gives you nothing. Give up the small battle when it protects the important one. And leave when staying has become more expensive than going. That is what it means to be difficult to outsmart. Not because you always know what other people are planning. You never will. But because you no longer allow surprise, emotion, ego, or pressure to make every decision for you. You observe, you adapt, you choose, and then you move. The next time someone compliments you, notice what happens afterward. The next time someone disagrees with you, listen before defending yourself. The next time a room feels strange, do not rush to speak. The next time you want to explain yourself, ask whether the explanation actually strengthens your position. The next time something reaches its peak, ask whether holding on will preserve its value or slowly destroy it. These small pauses change how you move through the world. You begin seeing patterns instead of isolated moments. You begin recognizing timing instead of reacting to urgency. You begin understanding that not every action needs to be visible. And eventually, something changes. You become harder to manipulate, harder to predict, harder to distract. Not because you became someone else, because you finally started paying attention. The sharpest move is often made before anyone realizes a move is happening. See first, think second, move third, and when the moment is over, know when to leave. That is how you stop being the person who is always caught off guard. That is how you stop playing every game on someone else's terms. And that is how you become one step ahead, not by controlling everyone around you, but by finally controlling when, why, and how you move.